Hello everyone, and welcome to the second podcast for day 27. In this podcast, we want to talk about some misconceptions of evolution. And I'm not the one spending a lot of time on these because I want you to look them up as well. But there are 6 statements that the note-taking guide asks, and we need to look at them and determine why they are misconceptions. The first one is mutations or adaptations are produced in response to environmental pressures or needs. So I'm going to shorten this one and say mutations are produced in response to the environment. Okay, this is false. And the reason this is false is that the mutations aren't produced, they've always been there. So if you have an infinitely large population here, and you have different organisms, I shouldn't say infinitely large, it wouldn't have to be infinitely large. Each of these organisms has a genotype in it, an allele pair. And we'll write our favorite ones here that we seem to write a lot, but it gets the point across. All of these alleles existed in this population to begin with. And so when natural selection acts upon the individuals in this population, it only acts upon the alleles that are present. Maybe in this particular population, under certain environmental pressure, A1 has a distinct selective advantage. It may not be the best, but it's all that this population has. And so this one, all the other alleles will be selected against, but this allele will be selected in favor of. So new mutations are not produced in response to the environment. We have what we have. Okay, the second one. Individuals evolve. We've talked about this before. Individuals So there's two important points to make here. One is that natural selection acts on the individual. So in that picture I just drew, natural selection is acting upon those individuals in favor of the allele A1. Because it's acting upon these individuals with A1 will be favored in this population. And because of that, the population evolves. It evolves because individuals experience natural selection. They mate, and then they generate in that population more individuals with this A1, or whatever gene allele is being selected for. So the short answer is individuals do not evolve, but populations evolve. The third misconception is that natural selection produces or increases variation. So we'll say produces. This is also false. Natural selection doesn't produce variation. Because there is variation, we can have natural selection. So let's say if you didn't have variation, if you had a population of identical squared organisms with no variation, if natural selection acted against the squared organisms for whatever reason, they would all die and that population would be gone. But and natural selection, when it's wiping these out because of this evolutionary force that is acting against these squared organisms, it's not producing new variation. It's preventing these squared ones from surviving. However, if you have a population of squared individuals, triangle individuals, circled individuals, squared, let's see, what other shapes can we make? Maybe a diamond. Because there is this variation, when natural selection acts against the squared individuals, it actually reduces the variation in this population, but because of this variation, the population continues to survive. But it doesn't produce more variation. It occurs because of variation. Well, I should go back and restate that natural selection would occur regardless of if there's variation or not. Whether or not the population survives, if there is variation in that population, then it will survive. Okay, number 4. This is a good one. Natural selection results in a perfect match. Between organisms and the environment. And we talked about this in a podcast for the Friday's class about several examples of why we don't get a perfect match. And so I don't want to go through all those again, but you should know that this statement is false. And briefly, some of the reasons we talked about was that as a population's evolving, because it's not making new genes, it's evolving using the pre-existing genes, that limits what the next generation can be. You can only be as good, or I shouldn't say as good, but you can only produce that next generation with the tools or the alleles you have to begin with. Another example is sometimes compromises have to be made. And we talked about the seals, where the seal, its flippers aren't very good for walking on rocks, but they're really good at swimming. So the compromise was made that it was more important to be a fast swimmer than a fast walker. It would have been great if they could have been a fast runner on rocks and also a fast swimmer, but the compromise was made that it was better to be a fast swimmer. So let's look at the 5th one. Fitness refers to better physical traits. This is not always the case. Fitness, so I'm going to put false here, because this is a false statement. Remember, fitness always refers to the ability to make more offspring. I should say viable offspring. You know, for instance, if you had a cricket here, there's a famous story about crickets in Hawaii, which I won't have time to talk about, but let's say you had a cricket a male cricket, that could use its wings to make music, right? So it attracted all the females, and so it was able to mate and produce a lot of progeny. So it had better physical traits, and as a result, it made more progeny. But the reason it was more fit was because it made more progeny. Because what would happen, and this actually did happen, is if some other insect came along, in this case it was a wasp, that laid its eggs on the cricket, and then its progeny developed on the cricket. But it laid the eggs on the first kinds of crickets it could find, and it was the ones that could make music. So now, even though these crickets had better physical traits, the male crickets with no music, couldn't make music with their wings. They now were able to mate more because all of these crickets were being destroyed by the wasps. So even though these crickets had less advantages with their physical traits, they were able to reproduce more, and so now they were more fit. And so this can change over time, but the ultimate goal is to reproduce more often and make more viable offspring. And the organisms that can do that are more fit, and their genes will be passed on to the next generation, which will allow that population to evolve. Alright, the very last one now it's very much related to the last one, but that fitness is related, well, the things that is always related to differential survival. meaning if you're able to live longer, you're able to produce more progeny, and that you would be more fit. Well, this is also false, because it's not necessarily true. You could have an organism, an individual, that could survive a very long time, but if they don't reproduce often, then they're not as fit. They don't pass those genes on to that next generation. That's how you win. You got to pass your genes on, regardless of how long you survive. All right, that ends this second podcast. If you have any questions, let us know. If not, we'll see you in class. Bye.